So all that being said, just to jump right into the topic, I guess, what do you guys think about masculinity or femininity, and like, I guess when it comes to the social kind of concept of these terms, like, do you guys have any opinions, biases, like just anything you want to say about your perspective on the topic, or?
Interesting. Let's let Brent speak first, because Brent has been here. I don't like people to be on our stages and not get to speak, and they might fall off, right? Brent,
yeah, my friend.
Brent, Brent.
Yeah, there we go. So the problem is the words have been messed up, and there's a political version, there's a current sociology version. Masculinity is historically well understood. In the current form, it's been bastardized. Femininity has been degraded and marginalized into just simply the empowerment of women. A feminine, truly feminine woman is significantly more powerful than the feminized go to work, ruin your possibility of having children. I mean, they're miracle makers, for God's sake. Let's figure this out. And there's nothing bigger than that. And men will crawl over broken glass for their wife, their spouse, their partner, their lover. So you have to divide which of those we're actually having a conversation about. It's not a social construct. It's a very real thing. If you raise young men, regardless of the environment, whether it's an inner city or a rural, I happen to be out in the country in Iowa, but it's the same. If you teach young men to be manly, that includes being able to hold another brother's head and weep and taste salt. That's as manly as you can get. And the defense of the underdog, all of those things are manly traits that everyone else admires when they see it, recognizes its absence when it's gone. And women, actual people women who know who they are, will rise up and follow that masculinity.
So if I could ask a question, do you, like, I'm not sure if you've looked into this, but I'm guessing you kind of see like masculinity being tied maybe more or less to like testosterone itself, or things that are more, I guess, typical of men, or, you know, femininity being more expressive of like traits of estrogen. I'm not sure if you're. Yeah.
I haven't got any idea about any of that as far as the biological side. I'd be out of my water if I talked about anything on that end.
Well, we're not going to get too deep into that, but the idea is that there's a lot of traits that are assigned, masculine traits versus feminine traits, and you can look at experiments where you literally just pump testosterone into someone, male or female, and you see how those traits will express themselves. So a woman, if you give her testosterone, she'll start having, she'll be more assertive. She'll start expressing competitive behavior, just everything that we would consider to be more masculine. They'll also start to grow facial hair, of course, and male pattern baldness and all sorts of other things. But aside from just that direct connection, there are things that we do or don't do that will directly affect the way our bodies produce estrogen or testosterone. So there's an experiment by NIH where they decided to see how power influenced testosterone. And it turned out that regardless of how you wielded power, even when they created an experiment to try and wield power in a feminine way, those women and men ended up having increased levels of testosterone. And then that with it came assertiveness, a competitive nature.
Sure.
But
I think
I wanted to see
that's. I mean, I get that, but those are anomalies. Maybe it's a situational where a person can be thrust into a circumstance and step up, develop the testosterone. That, on the other hand, I like Sad Gad. His, I don't know if you're familiar with him.
comedian, I think. Yeah.
No, he's a behavioral scientist from Toronto. Gad Sad. Anyway, he, they, as a professor, they've done their studies, and it goes clear back into monkeys and of a group, and they play with dolls. The girl monkeys play with dolls because that's what they do. The boy monkeys play with sticks and beat each other because that's what they do, and that's deeply into it.
Well, if I could, the more research I've done, the more I see it as basically like if you have something that is specifically designed, right? Like a female's body is designed for reproduction. It's going to have higher fat. You're going to have software to run that machine. It's like having software for your computer on your computer versus software, that runs your car on your car. And so now you can start to manipulate the software, and that'll start to manipulate the way it expresses certain things. But it seems to have net negative effects. Or, I mean, for example, if you give women too much testosterone, they won't be able to reproduce. And if men don't have enough testosterone, too much estrogen, then they'll also have erectile problems and everything that basically spells, the end of survival.
Sure.
So I guess I'd like to see the incentive structure behind why there's this desire to make it this the social construct, regardless of whether or not it's true. You see why people would want this to be the case, and maybe not.
Well, there's if you apply a threshold of evil intent and the destruction of mankind as a societal norm, I mean the feminization of boys, the destruction of all that is our history, then you can understand why they would do that. The application of evil intent throws a different hue on that behavior. It's the same reason why they're putting boys in girls' locker rooms. It's all connected at that level.
I won't deny that there's always going to be some, aspect of that. But what I realize, or at least what I've come to hear, things might change, but there's this terminology. Someone said something like, never apply to malice what could be attributed to ignorance.
Sure.
And so, imagine there's like 20% of kids nowadays are being raised by a single mother. And so that's going to have not just an effect on how these mothers feel while they're raising them, but how these boys come to be in the world. And so now, you've got this biology that doesn't favor conflict. It favors wanting to find security and safety, and the opposite of exploration and the things that are dangerous that promote more testosterone. And then so now you're there trying to raise your kid, single mother or whatever, and for whatever reason you see that you just see people that are doing better off than you. And then when you don't have the assertiveness that comes along with the testosterone and some of those aspects, can make it difficult when it comes to, like, getting a job for an interview or asking for a raise, because how can you be assertive, especially if over time you've grown to have a victim mentality?
Agreed. I mean, they're separate components that all contribute. And so let me give you some background. My father died when I was 9 months old. My mother didn't remarry for 4 years. So I've got 3 older sisters, and I lived in an estrogen-filled house for 4 years. What that did was it helped me to figure out how to communicate and listen better, so that I could then speak clearly about my needs or being heard. It left me with a absent, a hunt for adult male approval into my 30s. So I get that component as well, because it wasn't necessarily the best father figure that moved into the house. However, there's a study that I'm going to misquote, but it dealt with it's better to be a single mom raising boys in an environment where the whole of the neighborhood had healthy male role models than to have an intact family, because it's the peripheral exposure that says, I see those guys going to work every morning. I see those guys at the barbershop. I see those guys disciplining their kids. And that environment in a net positive. And it caught me off guard, because I didn't expect that result out of that. I would have bet on the other end. And go ahead.
I was gonna say that makes a lot of sense to me. It makes me before I lose it, I want to see the connection there between a certain traits like assertiveness. Annie, have you experienced any scenarios perhaps where maybe somebody was victim mentality? It's always woe is me, and then they may be not so they're more introverted, and then so now they come face to face with an extrovert who's also assertive. How do they usually? Do you have any ideas like how they perceive each other, or what you've seen in that situation?
Yeah, well, this is real life, right? I guess I'll speak more from a real life perspective. I do events, and we need to welcome our friend Anthony. I see you, Ileana. Of course, I see you. Good morning to you. Who's LinkedIn user? So thank you, Brent, for that observation. So I say for Kimberly, we see you as well. Tanya, welcome. Chanel. Okay, I can't see. I can see on stream. I can see on stream. You're not on LinkedIn, so I have a LinkedIn tab open. It's a weird one. I live in a society, and it's in England, and I'm sure you do in the US as well, where young men are losing their minds, literally. It might be part of what Brent said. In terms of, are they being feminized? I don't think. I think that's garbage. Maybe they're being feminized. I'm not going to say what you say, Brent, is garbage. I'm saying that in the concept of masculinity, it's many different to women. We know that, right? That's a fact. We can't argue with
some
that.
people. Yeah.
We're different.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we're different in our tendencies to be, right? But as I was thinking earlier, I thought, what? In reality, I live, if I were to live by myself, right? I would have to do the human thing to survive, right? Whatever that means. And I say, if I look at what happens in a home, for example, I got a wife, to have done for you, so, I would have to do what men and women do to survive. I can't just say, okay, I'm going to take the garbage out. I'm not going to cook. That's ridiculous. that's I'm not gonna do the washing up because that's a woman's role. I'm saying we have to come back to the reality that is a social construct.
Well, so yeah, so
the other day, right? Let me say this.
Okay, sorry.
Yesterday, I'm sure I mentioned it in the show yesterday as well. Anthony, essentially, she was like, for years you were narcissistic. I'm like, no, I wasn't. I was just being I was just being me. I was just being a young man who was ignorant. I didn't know any better, right? He's like, you made me do everything. I'm like, yes, because I thought that's how it is, right? You do the stuff at home, I go to work. I do the discipline of the kids. I'm just like, I'm like, but I've changed. I changed 20 years ago. I changed. I realized it's not about being a man or a woman. It's about what do I have to do to survive, to live through. We're a partnership, right? In a team, yes, you have a striker, you have a defender, and then if I talk about US sports, I'm saying you have linebackers, you have the quarterback that throws the ball, right? But no one in the team says, I'm not doing that role because it's not my role. Because I'm not a linebacker, I'm not going to do what linebackers do. Maybe you do in the American sports, right? I'm saying, in British football, soccer, I'm not going to say I'm not going to defend because I'm a striker. Literally, we're a team. We have to do what it takes for us to win. Sometimes that means mixing up the roles. That means doing what others do, what I wouldn't do normally, right? And that's the way we have to. That's why I look at this whole masculine and feminine thing, And I could talk all day, Anthony. But ask me the questions you want to ask me, my friend, and I'll try and fill in the gaps.
Well, I was going to say, I definitely understand that doing whatever you need to survive. That's just survival instinct. But what happens when you pick up a role that's, not typically aligned with your biology, and it starts to create mental, psychological problems, physical problems, and then you literally can't reproduce because there are certain behaviors that will increase testosterone, certain behaviors that will decrease testosterone, and if you continue to do one over the other, your levels of testosterone will drop, and it'll have all sorts of effects that could be mitigated in other ways. And so, one of the thing when I was asking about whether or not you've seen a situation where an assertive extrovert interacts with an introvert that has a victim mentality, right? Because they're not used to confronting difficulty. The response from the person who plays, victim is usually that the other person is aggressive, that they're being dominant.
Yes.
But in reality, it's just assertiveness.
Yes.
Which is literally the cure to aggression, which if not used will become passive aggression if you're not even, if you're not aggressive, and it still becomes a huge problem. And so there's this weird balance that I see between both sides, where one wants to say that, there's a social construct and there's parts of it that you can manipulate through social means, but those manipulations have direct physical and mental consequences. For example,
I think you're going extreme. How I be does not. It's not going to change my biology, my biological, I guess, chemicals, testosterone and hormones. Right? It's just not. It's not. The fact that I don't scream, I don't play the dominance man, the aggressive man, the assertive man, for example. That's not going to change my testosterone levels. Sure. Are you suggesting it is?
Well, I'm saying that there's been research done by the NIH, National Institute of Health, and a lot of others, that basically if you don't use it, you lose it. And there are certain situations where your body actually needs testosterone.
We have testosterone, Anthony. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to go.
You know that driving a sports car can increase your testosterone. Doing things that are more kind of risky or on edge, where you're going at something and there's a chance of failure, and it may be even a little terrifying, but then you push through it anyway. Call for your body to increase testosterone.
That's excitement. Men and women feel this, surely. I'm saying, it's not going to. It's a man thing in that sense. Mm-hmm. Surely, I hope we can agree on that. If anyone else thinks otherwise, feel free to jump in.
Well,
brilliant, Michael.
Maybe you calm. I mean, it's pretty it's pretty clear that if you do certain things right, you're going to feel certain chemical responses in your body, right?
Yes.
When you're holding and nurturing a baby, that feels a lot different than if you're outside protecting your family from physical danger, or when you're outside dealing with
But you're not going to get more estrogen because you're holding a baby. You care because you're doing childcare and duties. Surely not.
But what it can do is reduce the amount of testosterone your body produces.
It doesn't reduce it. It can't reduce it. You know, we're just. I think how we behave is one thing. You know, we have chemicals inside us. So, you know, we have XY chromosomes. It's not going to change, right? And being a compassionate man, even being a feminine man, is not going to change that.
That's not to say that you couldn't have feminine traits, but then still do certain things that created increases in testosterone. That's what the research was literally saying, is that even when they had two different situations where you could wield power in a dominant, controlling masculine way, and you could do it in a much more feminine way, but the baseline, when you do this, there's this interplay between the dopamine circuits that lead to reward and how your body releases testosterone versus estrogen. And testosterone is actually converted to estrogen. So you can actually have high levels of testosterone increase. Yeah. And so it sounds
it's crazy. It's crazy. Look, I tell you where it takes my mind. It takes my mind to the middle-aged man who buys a Ferrari thinking it's going to give him youth. It's not.
Not driving it sideways and driving really fast and dangerous.
They're what they are. They're going down. You're middle-aged. You know, you're not going to have the same levels you had when you're 30. Whatever you do, my friend, unless you're not taking testosterone tablets or injections, I'm saying those are your options. But that's nothing else. You know, being compassionate, being kind, and being, you know, acting or behaving in line with your, what you feel, it's not going to change your hormone levels.
If I could be clear, having the ability to be kind, to express empathy, to do those things themselves, that's not necessarily problematic. Again, like the research was showing, even when they had power being wielded in a very feminine way, so it was literally the way a woman would ideally, you know, the ideal feminine way of going about it, they still had increases in testosterone. Those increases in testosterone had effects like increased assertiveness, increased levels of competitiveness. You know, it's just part of the thing, right? If you're leading a group of people, and are you going to be more or less assertive after the fact?
Okay, so I would say I think we are.
All right, see you later, Eliana.
I think we're talking about now. Welcome, Lisa. I see you're my superstar friend, and Lisa's my best friend on LinkedIn. So, and in the world, so it's all right. Right, Anthony. I think we are you're doing a correlation whilst trying to find the causal effect. All right. Testosterone levels associated with is one thing. It does not necessarily cause or make happen anything.
Oh, so you're saying testosterone doesn't make anything necessarily happen?
It doesn't make me more assertive or less assertive. You know, it's associated. You know, it's related to. It's seen to go up and down according, based on levels. So it doesn't. It's not a causal effect.
Well, so testosterone itself can have a direct link. And so, to be clear, I feel like this is an area where I'm trying to. It almost seems like maybe I'm trying to defend a fact of, like, you know, men are here and women are here, and you've got to act manly and you got to act female.
But
that's not what I'm saying at all.
No. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. But I'm not of the belief, as I said, that men are from. I've seen in the comments, as Kimberly says, that men are from Mars, women from Venus. I'm not really overly into that. You know, we are to a degree. There's differences, of course there are. But I think the difference is that we choose to either accentuate or moderate. Right? I'll stop here, my friend, and I'm going to come. I'll give you the mic, right? You see, when I think of things, I guess the big lesson I learned years ago is that life is all about attitude. How I behave, how you behave, Anthony, how women behave towards me, how my wife behaves towards me, how my kids behave towards me. It's all about attitude, my attitude to them, right? If I approach, it's a simple one. There were days when I would sit in my office, do my work all day, and then realize I have to go downstairs, get a cup of tea, get some food, do something, right? And then I'll do what came naturally, which was to almost brace myself for a war. My attitude was, I'm gonna go and fight downstairs with those people down there, with the family, right? And then lo and behold, I'll go down there and there'll be a war. Someone was going to start an argument because they said something I didn't like, didn't treat me with the respect I needed, or whatever, right? It took me a long time to realize my attitude brings out their attitude. You talked earlier about assertiveness and someone who is probably more introverted. So we bring out the behavior in other people, bring out the behavior in the females. If we go head to head with war, our wives will fight us. The women in the house will fight. My sisters will have to fight. But if we go with being human, being real, being nice, being our normal self, being just a human who is in a relationship with these people, they will act exactly the same way. If we approach them with love, they'll show us love too. If we're approaching with anything else, they'll throw it straight back at us. That's how life works. Mm-hmm. Now I'll stop talking now.
No, you're right, and that almost kind of for Colin mentions. Quick two aspects. One was a question I guess we can answer later, but the other one was yes, definitely people will mirror your responses or mirror how you behave, and then so there are certain situations, right, where let's say a leader, like one of the masculine traits that they might say that's toxic masculinity is the stoicism, the idea that a man shouldn't or wouldn't cry, and obviously that's bananas, right? Like a person should cry, but then you have to understand the context that they were putting this in, right? And in the context of someone who's trying to take up a competitive or leadership role, you have to imagine if I have someone who's my leader, right, man or woman, I don't care who they are. But if there's a moment of turmoil and uncertainty and chaos, the last thing I want to see is my leader crying or getting nervous and breaking down. That's what I would love to see is someone who is calm, assertive, kind of emotionally more detached. And those are the traits that, again, they're not just, you'd want to say that they're causal, but they're linked both directions. That's to say you can give somebody the chemical of testosterone and you will see their behaviors fluctuate. You can even see it go all the way up to like roid rage. You ever heard that? So you can see how that can go all the way to the top ends of things.
No. My son is he's a gym freak, but he's not on steroids yet. I had a friend who was, right. The roid rage. I just want to know. It's the funniest thing to see. It doesn't make them more manly. It just makes them more stupid.
No.
I had a friend, Rick. I had a friend, Rick, who he literally was on steroids a long time. Now, Rick, when I played football, soccer again, he would break his arm and carry on playing. I'm like, that's not a man. That's just dumb. That's dumbness, right? When if we turned up on a day and there was no game, we started frothing at the mouth. I'm like, you're just crazy. You're not a man. That's just dumb. What's wrong with you? You're an animal. I'm saying, right? Men don't need to go that far.
No, I agree, and I feel like sometimes in our minds we get the we take things to the extreme context. But aside from the fact that the chemicals themselves, which we understand, will influence the way you feel, which will then influence the way you act. But alternatively, if you act a certain way, you'll feel a certain way, right? Again, like if you're there taking care of the kids and you're like, man, I love them, and you're kissing them on the head and you're holding with the bottle, the chemicals that are being released and the way you feel isn't going to be something that's going to, it's not going to drive your body to produce more testosterone to increase things like the muscle mass, to increase. It's going to do less.
And
just
that's crazy. That's crazy.
So,
that's crazy. That need
don't
to go to the gym.
So I'm saying, like, if you do certain things, you'll feel differently, right? Yeah, again, if you were outside and you had to physically defend your wife,
it's not.
You feel like I just protected her.
It's not fundamental. Holding a baby is not going to stop you fighting and dying for your family.
I'm not saying that those things make the difference between a man and a woman by any sense. And I'm not saying that a healthy man should definitely hold a baby and be able to do all of that, because
yes,
as we have estrogen, we also have estrogen. Our testosterone converts to a certain amount of it. What I'm saying though is that behaviors, the stuff that you literally feel, you do a certain thing, you feel a certain way, those chemicals have effects of either increasing the amount of testosterone or reducing. And testosterone itself will also increase dopamine, which will then increase the drive to do things more. So I don't know. I guess in my head, I'm just like, are you telling me that the way you act or the things that you do don't make you feel different ways?
Of course, they make you feel different, but I don't think they're going to change your hormone levels the way you're suggesting. I don't think they're going to change whether you're a man or a woman, fundamentally.
Not changing whether you're a man or a woman, but it will definitely change over time. Anything you do enough will become a train. Yeah.
Can you restate what you're advocating for? Because
exactly,
we've been 38 minutes and I'm not clear on it.
Okay. So what I'm stating is that instead of trying to link masculinity or femininity to men or women, or to say that it's some construct, we should understand the life that we wish to live, man or women, and recognize that our behaviors are going to impact the chemicals in our body, which are going to then express themselves as more masculine or feminine. They're also going to have larger effects down the road if you're a man or a woman when it comes to the way you look, the way your body, looks. And so if you want to be very feminine and look very feminine, then certain behaviors will be more or less helpful for that. And also the way you feel emotionally. I'll give you an example with a kid, and then I'll move on to Kimberly, or to Calm, and then Kimberly. But there's this kid his mother was telling me, like, he doesn't really, nothing bothers him. He doesn't let anything get to him because she's been kind of she's been pushing him to be less assertive, to be more, just let things slide, to just kind of let things be, right? Which is something that's less, that's more focused on the estrogen dominant, not testosterone dominant. And then the result of that is that because he's not able to express himself, he gets to a moment where there's anger, this rage, you black out or whatever they say, where you just see red, and then he ends up in fights. And this is something that's been seen consistently with boys that are raised in single mother households. They tend to have more behavioral issues because they're not learning how to express the physical and chemical needs of their body.
Sure. Especially
during that point in time in their life.
I hear that, and then I think I believe we need to add a layer of temperament or personality, as well as the discipline structure that is the daily activity at home. It's never binary, it's never singular. So you start adding in, you had a bad day, and suddenly you're not listening to your child when you come home from work, and they feel shut out, and you do that for a week, and suddenly they're angry, right? And they've got no ability to express that because they're children, and they don't know how to put voice to that. So all of a sudden you're looking at a Friday that's angry, but you didn't look at the Monday through that built up to that. So I don't think it's that clean of a thing to say, well, it was testosterone. No, it was your bad parenting. That's what it was. And you had some excuses for it, but to pick out one line and say, let's talk about testosterone or estrogen is to not take enough data into consideration.
Yeah, there's a lot more behind it that I didn't want to get into.
I believe that.
Simply put, yeah, it's just the idea that on average, females are going to be a lot more empathetic. They're not going to find themselves in more conflict. And so a boy that's raised to kind of repress conflict may do so to an extent that they have no outlet because they hadn't had that. And that's not a problem of poor parenting. That's just you can't do two jobs. Go ahead, Annie.
I think you can do two jobs. I think I agree with you entirely, Brent. There's more to it than testosterone for sure.
Yeah,
I think communication skills is a thing. I think that's more where I would focus my energies for that kid, for example, right? Communicate how you feel. Work on how you feel. Don't bottle it up. Communicate it. That's half the answer.
But if you get in trouble for communicating it, then that's where they run into issues, right? It's like
no.
Go ahead.
I knew you're gonna say that. No, men can communicate if they choose to learn to. Doesn't make them.
No, I just meant like if you're in a scenario where you were raised by a mom and the only person you need to communicate it to your parent guardian, but she's just not receptive to that. She can't. Yeah. She doesn't like the conflict or the stress, is what I'm saying. So then, who does he express it to then?
And I think that Anthony makes a good point. And I think, there's been a current event that just happened, right? And so we can't ignore this. We cannot ignore this. We need to look at the biology. So that example that he just brought forward really speaks to the fact that we need both the masculine and the feminine when we are raising our children. We're seeing some changes in our boys. You gave, Anthony, I really appreciate that example because we can't ignore that scenario and why that's happening, right? Because that is the purpose. Again, I was raised both with a man and a woman in the house, and I was raised by a single mom, right? There were things that I needed from the male presence that I did not.
She cut out. I did not. Right? What was this person?
Patience, my friend. I'll give it a few seconds. She'll probably come back. I hope she comes back. So. Okay. I'm sure we could dissect what she said, but let her come back first, and then we can talk about it. While she's here. Let's talk to Calm. Let's see what Calm's ideas.
Yeah.
Oh, you're back.
I'm sorry, honey. Yeah, having some connection. But these are building blocks for building our young people, right? We're seeing this in our world where we're trying to say, well, I am woman, hear me roar. Yes, there are spaces that you can do that, but we need to stay in our lane, so to speak. And that's why I love John Gray's body of work. I think it's something that we all need to explore because he talks about the masculine, he talks about the feminine, how we both men and women have masculine and feminine sides, right? But men biologically are designed to be hunters and providers, and women nurturers. So when we see men nurturing the young ones, it's not that they can or can't do it. It's that biologically they're a hunter, right? So we're going to see different outcomes in our generations coming up because of it. That was great, Anthony. And it's something that we need to continue to peel back and look at. This is not a problem where we need to medicate these guys or there's something wrong with them, right? I have 2 boys. I would never want them to think that there's something wrong with them because they can't nurture the way a woman nurtures. It's biologically just crazy. Are they nurturing? Yes, but they don't do it like the woman does it. That's because we're designed to do that. So, yeah.
There was actually studies where there was toddlers and kids and they showed that a kid would just had a natural preference that when they wanted to play, they would go to their father, and they would typically play more with the father. And when they felt like they needed to be nurtured or they needed some sort of comfort, they just naturally would go to their mother. Now you can try to play both roles, but I don't know how one person can be both the pilot and the stewardess, or both the mechanic. And there's 2 different roles, and if you play one, then you're neglecting the other. And you can't just assume that you can do 2 things at once, because I wish I could do it, but I've tried to do multiple things that are less complicated than raising a child. And,
look, I'm not saying, and of course, if there are comments on screen, then we'll tend to address the comments, right? So, I think you can talk through every situation. Now, Kimberly, I agree with you. The kid needs a man, a dad and a mother. Of course, I totally agree, right? If you see Janice's comments, she says it also depends on the male presence and how they express their masculine in their lives. Boys need someone to role model, right? That's dad, because the dad is more like them. Right, biologically, and that's the way life works, right? But I think we don't. Kimberly, there's no bears anymore. There's no, not in England anyway. We don't chase bears. I don't need to be a hunter ever. I need to show my son what it's like to be a man, a happy man, a man who lives with purpose, a man who lives with joy. That doesn't involve me winning against his mother. It just means me being me and a happy me, and I think that requires a different type of masculinity than we were given when we were kids. I think that I grew up with a dad. He was a total bastard. I'll say that, really. We left him in the end. I put myself in care because he was a crazy animal. Because that beating your kids is not. It's wrong. I'm saying right. And would my mum have stopped him? Maybe, but I don't know, right? I'm saying, well, she wasn't there, but still, I've had to come around now to realize my masculinity is not the thing necessarily. It's who I am and what I model to my son that will make him who he becomes.
No, and I just want to clarify that. When I say a hunter, I'm saying that from if we look at years ago when we looked at the role of the man, I'm not saying that it's in a violent sense. I'm saying that's how if we look at the wiring in the brain, if we look at the biology and how we were created, it just means men go out and they want to provide for their families. That's the hunter in them. That is the healthy hunter. Some of these other things, I think, are a manifestation of trying to change science, trying to change the brain into ways to adapt, right? Because this conversation can expand. We could talk about adaptability. We could talk about trauma. We could talk about the wounding and how the wounding impacts that overall development. But no, when I use...
If I could, a quick question I would think just to ask to yourself is, how many women look for high-paying, high-status jobs so that way they could support their husband?
My wife.
Take that.
My wife.
I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I see it with my mom and my stepdad, but I'm saying over the average right now, right? Typically, it's for men, it almost becomes their desire to have relevance, because at the end of the day, one man can impregnate. I think one man had 1,000 kids in his lifetime back in the history, and Guinness Book of World Records, one woman had 69 kids or something like that, the most that they could have. So as a woman, you have value. You can't just be replaced because you're doing so much already, the nurturing process. And so for a man, it's if you're not providing in the household, then you start to wonder what's your value. And then your significant other may ask what's your value, and your kid might ask even.
Let's hold that for a second, Anthony. So, you mentioned you said many things very quickly, and we can get conflated, right? So let me speak to that for a second, if I can. Look. So my wife has more high-paying job than me because I started a business. Before that, we were earning pretty much equal, right? You see, when I realized what was coming, again, I think this is where we do our sons down or wrong, right? We know we can see what's coming, and we can plan for these things. What I did was start a business, a property business. That is where our money. We have a joint account. That's where our money. That's where we live from, right? Her money is her money. My money is my money. Now 10 years later, I'm making money. Okay,
If I could clarify though, it's not just necessarily how much money; it's the potential to earn. So you could have enough less.
The fact that I built a property business that made us a great living, right, means I never had to feel inadequate or that I'm draining her, right? I'm saying that, it's about us teaching our kids to do the right thing, to build that sense of self, that sense of purpose, right? On simple terms, it means go to school, get educated. Don't be a waste.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
It's a hard thing, right? And I think we need to try to teach our sons. You need to get educated. You need to find a purpose. You need to you need to contribute to your own life. Never mind the rest of it. Because if you have no partner, then what? I say, but our sons need to grow up as good, healthy adults who can look after themselves, and then they can join a partnership with a woman or another man if they insist. Right? I'm saying that.
I agree.
Right.
I misspoke when I said simply just money. The biggest thing is the potential to provide. And so imagine, maybe it would be different, but I imagine that if you didn't have anything that you were trying to do, like you weren't trying to run a bit, you had, Annie is just trying to sit on the couch and watch TV and eat off his butt. Your relationship would be different. It may not even exist, possibly. I don't know.
Yeah, rightly so.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what I'm saying. When it comes to hypergamy, women follow that where they tend to look for a partner that has either higher earning or has high potential, that shows signs of, they're driven, they're working towards something. Yes. A man will find a woman on the street or at McDonald's and she's beautiful and he'll take her out of that lifestyle and give her everything he's got. A woman is far less likely to be.
I think you're hiding this a truth in what you're saying. And here's the truth I think you're hiding, Anthony, which is that given the choice, a man will happily sit on the sofa all day and let the wife go and work. If they thought it would give them the lifestyle they want, they will do it. And most men would do it. I think most men try to do it. It's when they realize that there's a cost to the sense of self, the masculinity, if you want to call it that, right? That they said that's when they say, oh well, the world is unfair. The world didn't give me what I wanted, and then start creating problem from the situation that we created ourselves by not doing, by not learning, by not developing, by not being ready to be part of a partnership.
I'm saying that's haven't done anything. Yeah, I agree, and I think that's something that is far more troubling, especially for younger males on average than women, to have no direction, just because, well, for men, their ability to compete in the sexual marketplace is based on the potential to provide or their ability to provide. A woman is not the case at all. It's almost negatively correlated, actually, where if they earn too much, it actually makes it harder for them to find a significant other. It's like the tall girl problem, basically, if you ever heard of that. It's like the woman that wants to date someone taller than her, but she keeps getting taller. So when we see these things, right, I'm not stating these things like I like the results, like I'm just stating the things that I see clearly, the data that's connected to them, and then discuss how to go forward from there, being more educated and understanding that, yes, if you behave a certain way every single day consistently, your body, just like if you develop muscles, your brain will develop neural connections, chemicals will get released more or less. These have effects on your body, and those effects tend to lean toward lower testosterone if you do things that require less testosterone, less dopamine driven, risk reward kind of seeking, trying to put yourself out there and make yourself valuable. That aspect of going out and getting an education and making yourself worthy of someone, that pursuit is part of the whole the dopamine, and it would link to testosterone. So it doesn't have to be a hunter-gatherer. It just has to be that pursuit of like the unknown and the novelty and the taking a risk to invest in yourself in some way to make yourself valuable.
I think it does. I think it is hunting and You know, and we have to stop trying to feminize our men. We need our men, and we need to honor them for who they are. Like I said, I have 2 boys. I wouldn't necessarily want them to not be who they were designed to be, right? This has nothing to do with either side, right? You know, so we're all in this conversation. We're sharing our thoughts and our perspectives to gain greater clarity on what resonates for us. Not trying to change anyone's mind, but I think it's important in terms of science. It's in terms.
While she's frozen there, is it Jancy mentioned something here? You create pathways in the brain all the time if you want to, which yes, you do. And so when she had here, you can learn to be a hunter or you can learn to comfort. And I agree 100%. You can learn to comfort.
I agree.
You can learn to be a hunter.
You were talking about the chemistry and, you know, the chemicals in our body. That's biology. That's science. You can't argue with that. And when we start to argue with it, you know, I don't know. I think that's why we're seeing some of the things, Anthony, that we're seeing in our world today.
Yeah.
And
but there's some aspects of it that are true, right? Like Jancy said, you can learn to be a hunter. You can learn to comfort. You can be a man and learn to do and be the more feminine than any woman around. But at the end of the day, if you're not doing anything that stimulates pathways that lead to testosterone release, testosterone need, then your body won't produce it because your body really doesn't produce anything.
Your testosterone release. We have testosterone whether we like it or not. No, here's what I would say. I think masculinity has changed in the concept. Mike says halfway up the comments feed, I'm more than my chemicals. Manhood and being a man in today's society, being a successful man, is changed, and men must come to terms with that. You know, I think when we use the word feminize, it has a negative connotations. It suggests a bad thing. I think that's just not the case. You know, being a man has changed. There's no, like I said, there's no more bears. I don't even have to kill a snake in England anymore. So it means, you know, my way of protecting my family has changed. I don't have to fight anyone. You know, what I need to do is get myself a brilliant door alarm with a video that protects my property, right? That's what I need to do. I'm saying the world has changed. We need to come on board and realize that the old ways of you that we have to be assertive, aggressive men, it just doesn't work today. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Well,
really quickly, I think one thing I want to address is to not mix up assertive, aggressive, because aggressive is like when you go too far. So assertive is great because even if you wanted to be empathetic, how do you express empathy without being able to be assertive? Right. How do you express empathy for someone who isn't there? Especially when, you know, maybe someone has some problem with someone else. You can be fake and just enable, or you could express empathy for the other person. But how do you do that without being assertive? And to be clear, I don't think the idea of feminizing men is just bad. Like everything in the world, it comes with positive, it comes with negative. There's not a single thing that's a free reward where it's just all positive or all negative. So adding empathy to the assertiveness, to the competitiveness, I think is an amazing idea. Imagine, and they've already shown this, where there's this small collection, I'm not sure if they're small, but a small collection of men on OnlyFans that aren't there for the women taking off their clothes. They're there because they get this thrill out of being able to change someone's life, basically, with very little, right? This woman's out there selling herself.
I don't believe them. They're lying. So they're lying. They're lying. You're watching porn without you don't care about the sex. What the hell? How are you talking about?
I can express this, and I can express this in other ways, right? Like, imagine you're, you know, let's say you're like 6-7 figures. You have like 7 figures. You're worth 7 figures or something like that. 6 figures liquid. Your wife is just always used to a certain lifestyle, you know. So if you go out and you spend, you know, $10,000 on this bag or whatever, that $10,000, oh my goodness, that's nice. She feels a certain way, and then you get that. You know, when you give something to someone, when you do something nice for them, you get that back positively, right? It feels good to help people, to see that change in their face. Now imagine you're that same man, but you have that $10,000, and there's literally this young girl, you have a daughter or whatever, and you see that they're literally out there selling themselves in an effort to make ends meet, and you take that 10 grand and you drop it on them, and now they're like, oh my goodness. But think about how that girl.
Give it to charity.
So I'm saying no.
Fund education for kids.
But how does that?
Else.
But you see how that doesn't give you that same reward?
I can't say how it doesn't, because if you want to help people, don't go on OnlyFans and start donating money.
I'm not saying that's. I'm not saying that's the way to do it. But hear me out. Hear me out, Annie. Hear me out. Does anybody here not like to see the positive response in someone's face when you do something positive? If I give something to someone and they're like, oh, thanks, and they just, the more positive the response is, when they're like, oh my goodness, thank you so much. I was literally planning to be on this computer night and day, trying to sell pictures of anything to try to make ends meet. But this guy who's making all this money, he takes that 10 grand that his wife would have added another bag to her collection, and that's like 4 different women's rent he just paid, like that. Boom, boom, boom. And so what I'm saying is the way that they will respond to him.
No.
I'm not.
That person's looking
take OnlyFans out of it, right?
Yeah, no, I can't, because that's where he started. On OnlyFans, that man is looking for titillation. He's looking for a woman to validate him. That's where it comes down.
Well, that lost the point that I was trying to make. There's an aspect of when you take someone who has a naturally competitive nature, they're assertive, and then you make the game about expressing empathy for others. Now these men are competing with each other to see who can be the best at expressing empathy, at helping those who need help. So basically, men who are looking around and saying, look at all these people who are less well off or that just really need help and can't do it themselves. The competition now becomes who does that best? Who's able to get the most responses from people where they run up to you and they just, like with Mr. Beast, and he went out and he dug those 100 wells out wherever, right? He could have just put that into some charity fund, but to actually put that money or to put those resources into someone's hands and see that response, that reaction from them, that hits me in the chest. That makes everyone feel good. And you can see how this is adding change to the way I and anyone sees masculinity. For example, Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, he cries very frequently in his talks, but it's never the situation that, like I described before, where you have a leader in a chaotic situation, he cries and that creates instability. When he's crying, he's expressing empathy for those who are without, those who he's putting his life effort into helping get them out of their rough situations into a better, healthier, productive human life. And so he's there on stage and you hear him tearing up, and all it does is it makes the message that much clearer, how much more he cares, how much effort he's putting into it. And that would be a feminization of a man, but you're not losing the masculine aspect of it, where he's asserting himself, where he's pushing past the opposers, the conflict. And so I just think what we have to realize is, again, don't go too much in any one direction. You want to add feminine traits to men, that's great. Don't lose the masculine traits that are important. You want to add masculine traits to women, that's great. But don't lose the nature, don't lose the feminine aspects that are just, they're connected to your psychological health, your physical health, your ability to reproduce. Because it's clear, if you do certain things, testosterone will increase. Too much testosterone will literally have effects on your body physically and psychologically. There's just no way to get around that. It's what the circuits are there for. If you do something, you get rewarded with these chemicals. Then these chemicals drive how you act in different situations. Do you get scared, run away? Or do you get excited and just think to yourself like, and then you run toward it? And then when you do, how do you handle that situation? When it's, all of these chemicals don't make you, but they don't not, you influence the chemicals and the chemicals influence you. It's a bi-directional thing. And so,
Anthony, I just want to speak to the feminine, to my own personal experience. So being a business owner, right? A lot of times as a woman, right? Trying to balance the responsibilities and do the things. It moves me to the masculine, right? It will move me over to the masculine. But what centers me is knowing that I have a masculine presence in the home where I can tap into who I am as a feminine woman. I can be feminine at home when the doors are closed, and like, that's important. That's important for us. Otherwise, as a woman, if I'm always operating on my masculine side, right? Hunting, gathering, going to get it, then what ends up happening is I start to lose parts of myself. And, I think this is a really important conversation. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with us. It just is information that we can kind of take a look at and see what applies to us and what doesn't, what resonates. That's what I love about personal development, right? It's what resonates. But I do know that from personal experience, if I didn't have that soft place for me to be like, oh, I can.
Okay, we'll do
After
5,
Kimberly comes back, I'm hoping to hear from Calm because he's been
3,
calm.
2, 1. Michael, we know Kimberly's going to come back, so
Thank you, Tracy.
Yes, I do know that Kimberly's going to come back.
speak louder, please.
The last thing she said.
Yeah, I don't have to, I don't necessarily have to, because if I'm on one side or the other, then I'm going to burn out. I'm going to burn out because I'm not being biologically who I was created to be. And I think that's why this conversation is so important. So thank you so much for having it today. I greatly appreciate it. And thanks so much for dealing with all my disconnection with my internet today. It's been kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's technology from time to time.
Well,
hey, Mike, it's good to have you here, man. But Calm, yes. Go ahead. Thank you.
That resonating implies that both the masculine and feminine properties that human beings have in their bodies are balanced. They need to be balanced, and let's examine this a little bit further. In fact, I'd like to also state that change is an absolute constant. It's an absolute constant. Man and woman and their roles that they play in the world or in the universe, it's going to change. But they can, and because they have both properties within themselves, they can take on both roles. They can play either role depending on how their brain is wired, depending on how they reconfigure themselves. All right, really expect a man and a woman to change in a manner that we currently cannot fathom. We currently cannot fathom. Why can't we fathom these things at this particular stage? It's because the sciences are seriously incomplete. They're incomplete and currently biased. All right. So there is more information that we need. There's more studies that need to go on. We need, and we need to involve everybody, because there are only certain people that, when I say bias, there are only certain people who are actually driving this science in a particular direction, in a particular way, with a particular mind frame, which is not, which does not consider the entire universe. It just considers their own agendas. And and that being the case, I could just say, science needs a long way, has a long way to go in order to foster cohesion with respect to how the resonation between feminine and masculine sides of the body of the body create that resonation. How do they create that resonation? But we know that we actually do get resonation when we're balanced. So it has to be balanced. Whether it's more masculine, whether it's more feminine, it's all dependent upon what the task that you're doing. All depends upon the environment that you're in. all depends upon all these things that we want to accomplish, because they can only be accomplished because certain levels of masculinity and femininity are either raised or dropped or equal, depending on the activity. The activity is what drives us to to be in those kinds of conditions, and etc. The other thing we also take into consideration, which I've recently learned, is that we've got such a thing as called menopause, where we chemically change, females chemically change, all right, and their emotions fluctuate. We know that, but I never knew that there was such a thing also in men, which is called andropause, and it's very similar. Same activity goes on. So to assume that men are not going to change, or women are not, or women are not going to change, I think that's just a fallacy. These are new things that are coming around, and we're taking a look at them and we're saying, "Gosh, these things are happening," and people are justifying. Yes, this happens to me, so on and so forth. I actually change. I fluctuate like a woman, up and down in terms of emotions at a particular age. I feel frustrated, and all these symptoms just keep on coming out. That basically tells you that yes, we both have both feminine side and also male side, and it's also going to fluctuate. All right. There was a thing that Anthony said about the brain. Well, somebody said about the brain. I do not know who it was, but the brain is mostly made of water. It can mold itself into a construct that promotes the survival of the body based on the challenges of the mind and the body, the challenges the mind and the body encounters on a typical day. It's malleable. So
you said on a typical day?
On a typical day, it rewires itself.
You're talking about neuroplasticity that occurs on a day-to-day basis?
On a day-to-day basis.
I mean,
that's what
so
I'm
like
talking about. That in order to manage this, in order to be able to manage different tasks that you're doing in a day, be it being at home or being a hunter-gatherer, whichever part of it you're playing on that particular at that particular time of the day, the neuroplasticity has to change in order to be able to accommodate that.
I don't want to get too into the weeds, but like, how when it's the kids, neuroplasticity is far more aggressive. Like, for kids' brains to update, to change, to pick up new things, it's very easy. Then once you get into about 25, 30, you can still experience neuroplasticity, but it requires conditions that force it to happen. And although you can have different neurological circuits that I guess are for a specific task in the day, the rewiring of our brain is a little bit slower, and that usually is something that happens partially through at night while you're sleeping, when you're going through random eye movement. And so the actual making of new connections, and then like the increasing of dendrites here, and the physical changes of it get harder and harder over time.
I cannot argue about the point of whether it's actually happening right there and then in the mind, but I can see that the effects that are happening on the ground when I'm actually looking at a person change from being one person and then being to another person. It's like as if they have multiple personalities.
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that
Anthony, can I ask Calm a question?
From one personality to another personality to another personality, and then back to the other personality. You do that within the course of a day.
Okay. Yeah. I agree with that.
Can I ask Calm a question, Anthony?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Calm, I'm interested in that. You really have me intrigued. So when you say science is incomplete, what are you referencing in terms of that? I'm really curious. I'd love to know more.
Like, for instance, when we talk about the changes in the body, exactly how it changes and when it changes, and having the exact numbers with respect to this change so much, and this so much change is going to affect this, and this so much change is going to affect that. That kind of science That's what
If I
I'm
could add
talking
on
about.
to that too, I think I could help
Something
calm
that
too.
is just, yeah, if you can help me there, that's also great.
Yeah, I
That's
think I
what I'm
can.
talking about.
One of the biggest things that I noticed when I was looking at this data, first of all, is there's far more test data, there's far more information for men specifically, like whether or not it's whole populations, just men. When it comes to just women, there's a lot less research. There's a lot less data there for that, which is something that you've seen people are doing more specifically now, working on. And then any experiment or any test where they're trying to see how one thing triggers or correlates to another thing, there's so many other variables that are also impacted. And so although there might be this one thing that can influence this, there's also several other things that could have influences on this that are indirect. So there's a lot of different, more nuanced components of it, but there are some very specific things that I would hope that we wouldn't throw away just because we're like, oh, it's incomplete, so this information's not useful, when some of it is extremely simple and very direct. And so it's just very easy to see the connections between it. It's like if you lift weights every day, your body will start to, as long as you have the correct nutrition, you're healthy, will start to develop more muscle in order to handle that. Certain exercises, like if you do heavy weights, your body will increase the density of your bones to help with that. Also, if you do things that require more the ability to not just be assertive, but to do things that might be scary fundamentally in some way, but then have a dopamine release as you pursue it. So like the pursuing of the unknown, then you're going to have the need for testosterone, because testosterone will increase the dopamine. It'll also help the way you experience those. Whereas estrogen will modulate. So in some cases, it may increase it slightly. In some cases, it may even reduce the effects, the amount of dopamine that's released with respect to certain tasks, especially like fear-based ones.
As Max spoken, he said, I don't believe, I struggle to believe that our chemical levels will go down if we do certain things or not. I truly don't believe that. That's just not factually correct. That's inaccurate. That's wrong. That's a lie.
If you didn't use your arm, would it get stronger or weaker? Like if you had it in a cast and a sling for a month, and you took it out of the sling and went to go use your arm, how well would your arm work? Would it be very weak compared to
that's different? That's different to chemicals. Our chemicals are being produced anyway. It's not as if
all the chemicals are linked to the movement. So when you send a signal to your muscle to move your muscle, it's not just an electric signal. It releases acetylcholine, which hits the muscle, and then there's the actual manipulation. When you experience a certain amount of adrenaline because of the situation you're in, right? That adrenaline is going to have, it's called norepinephrine in the brain. It's also going to have physical effects on your heart, on the way your body processes everything. So, like you ever see on those doctor shows, like give them an amp of epi, right? That's epinephrine or adrenaline. And adrenaline is something you can feel when someone swerves too close to you in your car, and you're like, what the hell was that? And you feel that like aggression come up because you were scared.
No, I drive a Mercedes. I always have done as an adult. I don't feel that aggression. If you drive past me, I look at you, I smile, and I'm like, when I want to go past you, I go past you again anyway. So I don't feel that. We don't need the adrenaline rush ever. I think there's different ways of getting it. I just got my client's book, right, in the post. That's my adrenaline. That's what gives me the testosterone. That gives me purpose. It's not by chasing wolves down the road.
No, it doesn't have to be just that. That's too narrow of a focus. But imagine, but what I'm saying is, I'm not saying that it has to be. So I want to clarify the difference. There's situations where you're saying you can find it in other ways.
Yes.
But then you're also saying, which I agree 100%. But then there's this other aspect where it seems like you're saying that doing something or not doing something doesn't have an effect. And I'm saying that's clearly not the case, right?
Look, being less aggressive, being less assertive, as you put it. I don't think we can ever be less assertive. I think as humans, we're programmed to try to be as assertive as we can be in a circumstance, whether that's right or wrong, right? I'm saying that's why I said earlier. If someone faces me with assertiveness or aggression, I will respond the same way. I respond in kind. We all do. That's human nature, right? But if someone approaches me with kindness, I will approach them with kindness too. I'm saying that there's
Unless you train you,
nothing's
yeah, and
lost.
even that, yeah, and even then you can train yourself out of that. So if someone responds to me with aggression, to look at them with the opposite of aggression, like what is that? You know, that can be something that you can train yourself to do. But that doesn't negate the fact that there are certain experiences in life that are going to have effects on the way you feel. When you get into a competition and you fail, like if you win, you're going to feel better. You're going to have these feelings, and those feelings.
But it's not going to reduce your testosterone. It's not going to make you make more testosterone or reduce it. And look, have you heard from Mike yet? Let's hear from Mike.
Yeah, Mike.
Mike is a wise man. Mike will give us something to work with. I know who will for sure, right? How you doing, Mike?
Well, can you hear me?
Yeah,
yes,
perfect.
It's a little muffled, but go ahead.
Okay. Let me try another microphone
It's fine.
setting.
It'll work.
It's working fine.
How about now? Is this better?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. I think the conversation I've heard so far is wonderfully simplistic. My concern, I believe, is it's many times multivariate, a lot more multivariant. And what I mean by that is, I know Anthony kind of wants to tie the chemicals, and I'm not. I can't make the argument that they're not connected. But for instance, I believe women, particularly women in the workforce that have risen to a certain, place in the hierarchy, are aggressive and assertive, both. And I've experienced some of those. So do they gain? I didn't measure their testosterone, but I think it's a little simplistic to say that these chemicals. Now, can they have an impact? Absolutely. And one thing I wanted to bring up for consideration is, as men age, their testosterone goes down. So does that mean we automatically become, and we have higher estrogen? So does that mean we automatically become more empathetic? And the one thing we haven't talked about at all, and this is I know this is gonna throw a wrench in the gears here, is something that I believe transcends all this, which is spirituality. And that's not easily measured typically. It doesn't really lend itself well for scientific analysis. But I believe, for instance, as a male, I want to protect the women in my life. And in fact, that is so strong in me, I would consider maybe taking the life of another that went after, for instance, an infant in an evil or whatever way. And so that's how strong that impulse is in me. Is that testosterone? I'm sorry, I'm having difficulties just connecting those two together.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
So
I can give you an example too, where it's opposite, right? Someone who may not be assertive in any situation may have something where they have to defend a child, critically, and then now it doesn't matter that she has very low testosterone and high estrogen. She may be extremely assertive when it comes to a particular need to protect her child, but that's not going to.
Actually, Anthony, something just came to mind. Sorry to interrupt. You've heard of sort of like this superhuman thing where a mom actually lifts a car. Well, again, was that testosterone or was that something else? Adrenaline. I don't know. Yeah, but I think that it's. I don't think that's easily explained. I mean, someone, a mother, like a 5'4" mother being able to lift a car off, an infant, to me is, I don't know. To me, it's a little more than just adrenaline. But all that to say,
it's an incomplete science.
Yeah. Well, you have to start when you make a statement of what caused it, there's always going to be a cause that started that cause beforehand. So what was the reason why the adrenaline was released in the first place? It was because of the love connection, all the circuitry that she has that bonds her with her child, the experiences, the memories. It also had to do with the ability to have an imagination, to see a future where they're either in it or not in it, that drives fear. And then all of those parts of who you are will then affect how your body then decides to release chemicals more or less, also based on what it has available. And then so in these situations, also something that's important to note is that a lot of times women's biology will be more sensitive to the same chemical signals. So they may not need higher levels of testosterone to have the same effect in a certain scenario. But typically speaking, right, like, or not typically, just in any case, right, you put men and women together and you have them do certain things, the natural reoccurring levels of testosterone in their body will increase. And then if you took both men and women and you put them into another scenario where they didn't need to use, these neural pathways, they're not using them. And so the baseline will eventually start to decrease. And so, yes, it's going to decrease over time as you get older anyway. But what you do, how you behave in the world, I think everyone can agree that's going to impact the way you feel. And the way you feel will also affect the way you act. And to think that there's no connection between how you feel and how you act and the chemicals that are released in your brain, I just don't see how. I don't think it takes a doctor to know that, certain times you're feeling anger, it's definitely going to be something different than if you feel tired, or if you feel lust, or if you feel that need to protect that you mentioned, right?
But Anthony, I'm gonna throw this out, and I'll give you a personal example. I just found out that my blood sugar can be affected by hormones, which obviously can be affected by emotions. So I don't think we're at a place, and this is where I'm going to agree with my brother Michael, I don't think we're at a place yet with science that we understand the complexities between the mind and the body and the interaction of the two. And I really appreciate the effort that you've done and the research you've done on these two major chemicals. But I just think there's way more than we know at the moment that is impacting this. And I think we're going to find out, I don't know if you've heard, but they're looking at using psilocybin for depression. So I guess what I'm saying is there's a lot of other there's a lot of other vectors or whatever that I think are connected with us. And also, and I don't have the information in front of me, but apparently reduction of testosterone in males as they age is somehow connected with something in our diet. I'd have to look it up, but and you may want to research this. But and then the our raising of estrogen, and there's a name for it. And I'll see if I can dig it up for you. But I guess this is my other thing is getting back to what Michael said, is that I think we're and it's fine to have sort of a broad brushes, but I think we have to be careful about saying, well, it's all estrogen or all testosterone. And my understanding, because of this issue with males as they get older, physical activity may actually not increase testosterone,
especially if it's prolonged, like distance running, that can actually decrease testosterone. But no, so first, yes, when it comes to the science, I don't think there'll ever be a point where we'll lock it down or be like, we've got every single variable exactly as it is. It's all mapped out and solved perfect, and we know it's. I'm not sure that we'll ever get to that point, because I think that we ourselves will start to develop changes in behavior, changes in diet, which, like you mentioned again, diet is another thing, right? There's certain foods that in consuming them can increase your estrogen, which by increasing your estrogen can actually decrease the testosterone, because there's an actual pathway where your body produces testosterone to convert it to estrogen that needs not there. And so it can decrease the output just because, again, it doesn't have the need. And I don't want to make it seem like I'm saying it's only testosterone or it's only estrogen. Again, because we're both made up of both, right? Every man and every woman have both estrogen and testosterone that are influenced by many things. But what I'm trying to state that's very clear is the same way food can have an impact on it, the same way exercise can have an impact on it, behavior has been pretty much proven. There's no other variables, and I can't see if any even theoretical. I mean, it just would seem really weird to think, oh yeah, behavior has no influence over that at all. I'm saying it's another one of the many variables that have an influence on it. And then these variables can have positive or negative feedback loops that increase the way it works. So, maybe you do something that rewards something that favors testosterone, and then that testosterone increases the dopamine. That dopamine then reinforces the behavior, the activity, and then so now you can have this positive feedback loop. But again, diet, biology, your state of mind can have certain levels of impact. But to try and divorce our state of mind, the chemicals released from our behaviors, I think is the problem. To say that you can behave however you want to and it'll have no effect on the chemicals that your body produces, and those chemicals will have no effect on the physical and psychological effects on your body. I think that if in itself is probably, that would be a hard argument. That'd be a much harder argument for someone to try and make and say, yeah, behavior has no impact on the chemicals your body releases or the way you feel. And those will not have any effects over prolonged periods of time.
I don't consider it binary, but I'll give you another example with my diabetes. When my sugar is low, or I can get upset. But if I know that about my chemistry, then my brain can take over and say, okay, this is because my sugar's low. Number one, I have to do something about that. Number two, I need to. So there's an order or hierarchy of what is controlling my behavior. Does that make any sense? So
yeah, for sure.
I like where you're going, sort of broad brush, but I think sometimes we have to look at maybe the details to figure that out, and particularly as it relates to men and women, because I don't want to be political or controversial, but I really am worried about having people that were biologically male take part in female boxing, for instance, where regardless of whether they're taking hormones and stuff, they just have a complete and utter advantage. I don't consider that controversial. Some people would. So
what about women taking testosterone like extreme levels, or even men doing so? Because if the chemicals don't really have that much of an effect, right? Then
I don't think they. I would be shocked. I'd love to see women that started out, as purely women, take testosterone and see what the impact is against a male.
Against the male, I wouldn't compare those two, but a woman without testosterone versus a woman with testosterone, you agree that there's going to be.
I would think there's some. There's going to be some,
right?
Yeah, there's going to be some
in sports, right?
Yeah, no doubt. I'm not saying there will be zero, but I'm saying if you can't take someone that was biologically a woman and give her testosterone and then expect her to be competitive against someone that was a male, particularly at the top of his form. I think it's just you're talking, really.
Yeah, I agree 100%, and I didn't even want to get too far into that topic because I feel like that's another fire pit to handle with gloves later. But it's more just the fact that, we agree that the chemicals have a physical effect on our body, a psychological effect, right? Someone takes steroids, they are able to recover from damage. It's also going to affect their behavior, their mood. So we believe that. But then now I guess there's the disconnect where people don't want to believe that your behavior will have an impact on chemicals released, even though it's like when you hug a puppy or a kid, you feel a certain way that you don't feel when you're outside, doing something more physical, or even now in this conversation where there's kind of like a back and a forth, and you have to, it's more of a competitive type of aspect. Wouldn't be in a competitive situation release chemicals that are different than the ones when you hug that child, when you kiss them on the forehead, and when you're thinking, I would do anything for you, right? That love that you feel, you don't agree that that's a chemical somewhere that's affecting the way our body processes, information, the way it processes food, the way it processes other things?
I'm questioning what takes the high order. In other words, like I just said with my sugar level, does me as a male, because again, I believe males and females are built differently, generally, and I'm using air quotes. Women are going to tend to be more nurturing. Males are going to tend towards, I don't want to say hunters, but they're going to be the protectors, which is a form of nurturing, if you will. And I think you had started down the road of the ability to procreate and such in large numbers. But for me, I had never had that inclination. I want to be able to take care of a woman in monogamy, and to make her feel safe. Which again, I think that's a healthy interaction between a male and a female, right?
I want to clarify. I wasn't saying it was like the proclivity to want to mate with 1,000, women or whatever. What I was saying is that because one man can mate with 1,000 women, that means the other 999 men that didn't get that opportunity, they're going to have, where do they find their value now? Because if they don't get the opportunity to reproduce, and so I'm saying that because men are innately, they don't have an intrinsic value, I guess you could say, the same way, or an intrinsic purpose the same way a woman does, because the woman, they have to hold the baby for a certain amount of time. Their body is literally designed where you can't just replace them the same way you can replace half the men with the other half of the men. You know what I mean? Like you could literally have just one guy reproduce with 100 women, and then the other men wouldn't get one. And so then now they're going to look for a way to increase their attractiveness, their market value, which generally comes down to competing for value. And that value is hard to find if it's not the ability to naturally just nurture, because what are you nurturing if you didn't create it? And the woman's going to be better at nurturing. So
I didn't create my grandchildren.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't create the neighborhood kid that I can show and model. I was a Bible school teacher. I didn't create any of those kids. So I want to honor what you're saying, because I think there's some truth to it. But I also think that it's not binary. No. We can have impact on the lives of other people that doesn't necessarily involve us procreating them.
No, but how do you? So I get that, but it's connected more broadly. How do you impact these kids if you haven't done anything to make yourself valuable? And what is value? It's going to be relative to what's available. And so then that creates a need for a certain level of competition, is what I'm saying.
No, I don't think it's competition. I think it's a way of being. We talked about this earlier, Anthony. I don't know. I'll let Mike respond in his way, because we talked about this earlier. I don't think it's competition. Now, the reason I say I interject, sorry, is simply that my son's 16, right? When I was a kid, competing was everything. I even went to a boys' school where you understood that by being good at something, competing, right? If not education, if not the topics, then suddenly sport, football, rugby, instead of sports, right? I've got a wall full of trophies, medals that I won as a man, young man, as a boy. My son just looks at them and he goes, yeah, they're good. He's got a few medals for running when he was younger, and I said 16 now. And he just says to me, Dad, I don't need to compete. I'm like, you're doing MMA. You're good at it. You're a great boxer. You are. And everyone tells him as well, Anthony, to me, right? You can be a winner. You can be a champion at this thing, this fighting game, right? It's like, I don't want to compete. I don't want to compete. I don't need to compete. I think what I'm trying to say is that I think today's boys, they're different to us. They don't feel the need to compete the way we did to stand out. You know, and maybe they compete on violent video games. Maybe, you know, that's it. That they certainly play it a lot. Yeah. I'm saying, but the way we used to do it, where you have to be the fastest, run the fastest, jump the highest, punch the highest, all that thing. Boys today, they're like, we don't care about that.
My definition of competition is much broader. I'm not just saying competing in some direct back and forth. When you create a book or any content, you're competing with every other. Think about it this way, right? So let me give you an example, right? When it comes to like a relative value, right?
I've just done this book, which I just got in a post for my clients, right? Mm-hmm. I'm competing against myself. My last book, my friend.
Yeah,
I'm competing against me. That's all I care about. This book is beautiful.
Yeah.
This is me. This is my best book yet. That's why I don't care about the other publisher. They can go F themselves.
Yeah.
I don't care. No one cares.
I agree. But let's imagine you were creating a book that wasn't of the quality. It didn't match the quality that was available, right? For whatever reason, it just wasn't. When people saw it on the shelf, when they saw it other places, it just wasn't worth their time. You would have to go back if you cared enough about it and invest more time, more energy, and effort into making a higher quality product. Because if it wasn't, then it wouldn't reach the people. It wouldn't get attention, right? And so,
can I insert this? And we talked about this recently, and that's this mindset that we have been lied to of scarcity. So what you're saying is that there's only a certain amount of ideas that are marketable in the world in book form. I don't agree with that. I believe we all have unique, we have the need to be seen, heard, and valued. I put a emphasis on the value, and I think we have to be careful about where we get our value. I believe that we have intrinsic value. So I'm not saying in the world there is zero competition. I'm not saying, but I think when we buy into this idea of scarcity and that there's only a certain amount of songs to be written and that I have to go along, for instance, with whatever the prevailing genre is to be successful. I believe that we are uniquely formed with ideas, and again, I agree with Michael too, that we change. Obviously, change is constant, and it's also growth. But I'm concerned about this concept of that there's only X amount of value, and that we have to compete. Now, I'm not.
So, I think that's the wrong idea. When I mention competition, you think like we're trying to fight for the number one spot, but competition can be to create the opposite, and so it doesn't work with scarcity. It could be just a friendly game, like between kids in this theoretical example, where it's like, okay, I may have won, but in this, I'm going to learn stuff. You're going to learn stuff. We're going to come back and do this again, and we're both going to be better. Now, you might win this one. I might win this one. And so in this scenario, it's not competing to get a single spot and hold it. Competing, it's just to continue building the ladder. This is the highest quality that's available, the best thing. And now I'm going to compete with someone else to see if I can make something a little bit better, maybe. And not because I'm trying to outdo them or anything of that matter, but it's like if you create the book, you care about the book, and you think people need to read the book. But then there's other aspects that go into making it of a quality that makes it so that way people will actually purchase it, right? How do you format the book? How the text is fit on the page, whether or not you promote it, all of that isn't the direct competition for, maybe a scarcity one. There's only one slot for me, but in a way there is a limited amount of time that people have. Where I think about how much information everyone gets bombarded with, how much time you have to spend doing any number of things. And then so when we create the things that we love for our own purposes to do better than ourselves previously, it's because we recognize that, at least in this scenario, then there's options to be chosen from. If I was to just put mine out there and not consider how it could be better, how I could influence it in a way that would, maybe I see something that someone else did and I take that in and I add it to my product to improve it. And then now it sells better than the other product. It reaches more souls. Why? Because, it was in its own way higher, it was more competitive, in the market space for attention, in the market space for just however many shelves. I think when they show books at the airport that get sold, there's like these spots, and the book at the top gets all the sales basically, and then 10% of the sales to the rest of them, and then everybody else is kind of just not even close. But everyone else is working. They're trying to compete with themselves, but also with others, because if there were no other books there on the shelf, then would we always still have that drive to push and make ourselves better?
Yes,
yes,
of course we would. Look, we are. Look, and maybe books is a very bad example for what you're trying to explain. And then I'll give you that, right? I'll say to you this: when you write a book, when you publish a book, if you want to be as good as you can be, go to any publisher like me and say, right, put all your knowledge and skills into making my book look as good as it can be, right? I've never had an author come to me and say, my book's not selling, I want to rewrite it. They just don't. That's not how it's done, right? I think maybe like all things in life, I think it's what's in your soul.
Yeah.
So we deliver what we're going to deliver, and then we live with it.
Mm-hmm.
Measuring yourself against others is such a terrible yardstick.
Yes.
But Annie, I want to follow up with Anthony. I've seen very few places, and I have an example in mind, but I've seen very few places where young boys use competition in a way to grow with each other. And here's my example. So I'm playing t-ball. My coach is telling me we have to win, win, win. If he doesn't and says, just be a nice boy, again, I think we've been lied to say we can't grow together. Mm-hmm. So we're in this gamification trap, in my opinion, that we have to win. And winning is, scoring, whatever it is, scoring more points, whatever the case. And so by elevating myself, which by definition means to denigrate others, at least the other team, that I become better or bigger or happier. And I'm of a mind today, that's not the game I want to play. Now, does that, and I'll be honest, Anthony, that has impacted me in business, because I've tried to be collaborative. It's kind of how I live my life is to be collaborative, and that doesn't necessarily work in corporate America. For me to rise to, whatever heights that I actually don't even reach. But I'd love to be valued for my contribution, but unfortunately that's not.
Or is it mine?
Are you not hearing me? Hello? Annie, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Give me a second. That's I was just leaving off my clients who is so delighted with his book. It's ridiculous. It's genuinely, it should be. My client is super. You can hear me now, no? Anthony
can't. I can.
Yeah, okay. You can hear me. Anthony can't hear me. Okay, that's a bit of a problem when your host can't hear you. I don't know what happened. Maybe it was me. I don't know. Refresh your screen, Anthony.
Oh.
I don't think him.
Refresh my screen.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, you can hear me now. Right. Sorry, Michael. What was your question? I think as you were talking, I was agreeing with you. There's an inherent truth to what Anthony's saying. I think the thing I picked up on what you said, Mike, if there's a question, please ask me again, right? What I take from what you said, Mike, is simply that the joy of winning, the joy of competing, is very, very shallow. It fades very quickly. I mean, how many games have I won in football? I've won many trophies, many awards, right? I've won many, many things. It hasn't brought me inherent joy. The joy is very, I won, okay, then we have to go again and win again and try and win again, right? But women compete too. I'm saying to you, it's not a male thing.
No,
it's not a masculine
100%.
thing.
And to be clear, competing doesn't necessarily mean you're that winning is where all of the value is to be found. When I mention competing, it's like an example where maybe if I produce something and it was never challenged, right? Then I would just think that that's where you see with a lot of people, then they get high up in a position and they just kind of rest on their laurels, right? They don't want to grow anymore. But then there might be a circumstance where you see someone else who's doing stuff that you think to yourself, wow, that's better than me in these ways. And you can have that competition mindset, not to put them down, but to better yourself.
Yeah.
To think, okay, well, if I want to, the way I see myself now, right? Because I thought that I had this position or whatever, and I realized that I don't, I can just be okay with it, and then I lose my usefulness. Or I could think to myself, you know what? I still want. It is striving to overcome. It's the idea that even if I fail, I still grew in the pursuit.
Right. Okay. I wonder whether we can accept, Anthony, that you're competing against yourself. Maybe this is a lesson to our sons, which is you're competing against yourself. You want to be as good as you can be. It means being honest with yourself. Testosterone is not the thing. It's about being honest with yourself and then doing what you have to do, which is learn more, be more, do better, right? But for today, as we stand, my friend, we can only do as well as we know to do now. And I think whether you're a man or woman, you have to accept that fact, right? Tomorrow, you can be better. Of course you can. If you learn more, if you do more, if you do better, right? But you have to give yourself that space. You can't be affected.
I'm going to say there is no joy in comparing yourself to another. And as something you're constantly being chased, you're going to chase. And I'm not built like him or her. That's not. There's something intrinsic to me, and I'm going to get back to this intrinsic value. There's something intrinsic to me that is driving me to do X. If I compare myself to Anthony, or if I compare myself to any, I'm never going to be happy because I'm not Anthony and I'm not any.
Yeah.
And you both are, you're on a different path. I'm not going to judge your path. It's completely valid for you. And this is where I'm going to keep on getting back to this trap of scarcity, because I don't believe that. Now, does that mean anything is possible? Well, almost. Or at least to your point,
it's possible. Potential.
But at least to your point, like if it's self-improvement, right? When I look tomorrow at today, I'm going to say, did I do something different, better? Did I make progress in this area or whatever? I'm not going to compare myself to Anthony or to any or to Joe down the street or to Jane down the street, because they're not me. And my joy. Go ahead, Anthony.
I was going to say, do you not see like the possibility where you can look out and see something and strive to try and do better, but then still have personal value in your own growth? That would be one. And then the other thing that I would point out as an example for positive reasons for competition would be one, like there was this, have you ever heard about this, before any human had ever run their first like sub 5 minute mile or something like that, nobody could do it. And then it took one person to do it. And then in their minds, if that person can do it, then I can do it. And then all of a sudden, everybody was doing it. Even kids in high school were breaking it. And so everybody was elevated in that competition. What about a situation where you're trying to innovate and everybody's failed up till now? And you think to yourself, you know what? I think I can do it. I think that I can succeed. And so now it's kind of like a competition, but at the end of the day, you still find your reward in your own progress.
I think it's the word competition that we're struggling with, Anthony. That's not the way it is. That's not the word. Let me use your example just now. Everyone's tried it. Even Roger Bannister was the one forming the mile, right? I think we're now at 252, something like that, right? I watched athletics, right? Say what we're doing essentially today is building on what they've done. We've learned the lessons they've learned, right? So Roger Bannister had pace setters. They had lots of pace setters to run, to moving quicker, right? So now we just have to pace ourselves quicker to get there. I agree with this competition. I think it's more like collaboration, co-creation. To get to be better. But again, the better. The mechanism is within us. It's not necessarily out there, right? It's those before Roger Bannister, for example, they're not sitting there saying, "Oh, I was awful, I was terrible." No, they just didn't have the mechanism, the process, the system.
I think you're adding in some baggage. Like when you comparing yourself to someone doesn't necessarily mean you're going to beat yourself down because you didn't. Did you guys freeze? I think it was just any.
Yes. It's just me. Okay.
So, have you ever heard about what about a rival? The idea of having a rival, and it's like a friendly competition that drives two individuals to get better. It's like the fundamental aspect of any story, right? There's a protagonist and antagonist. There's always kind of that thing to push against. I think we should find value in comparing ourselves to who we were yesterday, but the idea that competition in itself isn't something that should be valued when done appropriately. I think it limits us to where we can get to. It's because if that person does something new that I never thought of, and I also do something new they never thought of, we just created two new things. Versus if I was just trying to do better than myself yesterday, I don't have that same need for creativity, that same ability to test it to the most rigorous level. I think it's the fundamental aspect of rough and tumble play that kids like to have when the rats, dogs, it's part of brain development. And that kind of play only happens when there's when there's someone else there, right? You can't have that same competition or even play in itself without having someone else. So if you're playing Monopoly with your family, is that not competition? Is that bad?
I'm going to submit, Anthony. I'm wondering how often we see friendly rivalry, as opposed to what I'm talking about, which is this mindset of scarcity and only. And the other thing is, okay, so whoever did the 2-minute mile first, how long did that record last?
Not very long.
Because that's
not very long. Not very long. Literally weeks, and then other people were doing it.
And I agree with you that benchmark was set. But like, what's that worth?
What's that worth? It's worth all of the progress that comes after you. So not me having the championship belt. The idea that the next generation is going to be completely at a superior level because everyone built off of what you've shown them through the action. I mean, how do you play a game, right? Are there any games that you can think of where there's no competition?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
There really is.
There really is. Right. Now again, so now it's in the UK, for years, for generations, we competed. I made our kids compete, right? Whatever, in subjects, in sport, in the debates in society. I'm saying competition is what schools are made of, right? I said it in my day, right? Then suddenly, our government pretty much said, no more competition in schools. We refuse to compete. We appreciate everyone who takes part. We're not going to pick winners and losers because everyone who competes, is good enough. We appreciate all of you. He hasn't ruined our kids. He hasn't stopped boys being boys. It's just still the same. They enjoy school. Do I wish they would compete more? Of course I would. I told my son compete, and he's like, nah, don't need to. That's nothing for me, Dad. I'm not doing it. It doesn't make him less of a man, But he can quite say we can happily live without competing the way you're suggesting. Using others as a yardstick is a weird way to live. Now we know that, right? So I don't know whether it's Mike's point earlier. Oh no, your point just now, right? No, let's say you're the first one to do something. You're the winner, whatever it is, record holder, right? There's no real joy, my friend.
Yeah, no.
Because others are going to come and beat it. Because all you're doing is building on what others have done before you. Like I said earlier, right? Before you, there was someone else who had a record. They're not suddenly invalidated.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I'm saying, all you can do, and someone's going to come after you. By the way,
yeah. And so I think that's just because you're competing doesn't mean that you extract your joy from the victory itself. You extract your joy from the whole game process, everything that led up to the game process, and everything even after that. So I mean, you want to remove competition, but let's say there's this one or two the one girl in class that every guy wants, every guy's interested in her, right? And the way you act, behave, the way if you're funnier or more intelligent, or you're more physically fit, that's going to affect the way in which females look at you. And do you not see how I'm not going to compete? I'll just get whatever girl that's left over, or maybe not.
That's not the woman. That's not the woman I want to have anything to do with.
I agree, Mike.
Okay, so look,
Anthony, that's a
well, sorry. I want to argue that back, because I think if you were a bum, okay, just to say you had no sort of drive at all, Annie, you were just like, I'm just cool with my panhandling sign here.
It's not a drive.
But I'm saying, like, wouldn't you want your woman to have a high enough standard?
This part of the conversation we just had, Anthony, right? And I like them short and blonde. My wife is. That's how I like them. My son likes them big and black. Right. Unless that girl you're talking about is, I don't know what you're talking about. No, there's no one standard for everyone, is my point.
No.
We have preferences, we have tastes, we have our ways of being. Yeah. I'm saying, right. So
that's why I mentioned the array of things.
She's not going to meet everyone's criteria. Being blonde and tall doesn't work for me, for example. I say, no, that's I don't care about this girl, really. I have no intention of ever making an effort. It's not that I don't care about girls. I want the girl that I want.
For sure.
The other thing, Anthony, was when you're competing on status, I just felt, and I ran into this, that this girl was the sort of the most sought after on campus, and it's a long story, but she ended up in my bedroom actually for some reason, and I had no interest. I'm like, I don't want to have a relationship, because that's not what she was into. I'm like, I want to have a deep kind of relationship. So I'm not in competition for her. So but getting back, I wanted to speak to Anthony's comment here. Competition for a better idea is how you get progress. I'm not necessarily arguing against that, but I see, and all you have to do is look at Edison versus Tesla on how, for some period of time anyway, that almost didn't happen. We almost didn't have AC. And one of the only reasons that we have AC is Westinghouse. So competition is a double-edged sword. I'm not saying we can't get progress through competition, but we also have very, very good ideas that get squashed because of competition. And so it's a balancing act, guys. That's all I can say. And it's going to sound very kind of flip-floppy, but I see a value in friendly competition or friendly rivalry, but I can only think of like one big one, which was Bird and who did he play against? But there's very few that I can remember, like in sports, where you had friendly rivalry that kind of maybe produced a better player in each of them. They were all after whatever it was, whether it was championship rings or whatever. I mean, I think there's very few people for instance, in sports that are necessarily after just, for the game. There are some, but I think there are very few.
I think it's more general the way I see it. I mean, how do you even define what value is without it being compared? Like if you say this thing is more valuable than some other thing, isn't that a comparison? Isn't that like, when it comes to the woman example, right? Like if I want my wife or whoever to love me for who I am, but I also want her to have certain level of standards where if I was, not able to provide anything and I just was, I didn't strive to be as good as I could be, I would like her to look at me and say, you know what, like, not only are you not all that you can be, but because you are so relatively low on the value scale, right? You're not able to provide me with emotional support, financial, just something that allows them to compare, because we're always comparing, whether or not we want to believe it or not. The standards on how we compare and what we value most is different between individuals, but value itself is still defined by that basic, supply and demand kind of thing, right? If it's very easy and there's a huge supply for it, the demand's low, the value's low.
I can see Mike going into scarcity argument again. Demand is not low for you, for anyone. Those who resonate with you, those who are attracted to you, those who fit who are aligned with you. There's a lot of them.
To be honest, Anthony, I don't give a shite about someone that's not attracted to me, because I want to surround myself and provide value to people that are attracted to me because of who I am. For example, my wife, let's say, God forbid, I was in a serious accident and became, paraplegic. Would I want her to leave me because I can no longer do all the things I can do today? God, I hope not. Right? So I feel for you, and I understand what you're saying, and I probably agree with some percentage of it. But at the same time, I'm very concerned about this idea of kind of the survival of the fittest, and somehow, and I think we've promoted that. I mean, if we look at,
I think I'm the youngest, Mike. That's where Anthony sounds like he's going. But I know you don't believe that, Anthony.
Well, no, I'm just wondering, like, how I like the idea of you wanting someone who's with you because you provide value. But even then, when you say provide value,
because they love you. It's not provide value. That my wife doesn't look at me and think he provides value.
No, but she's like, you're a whole package, right?
Eh?
Yeah, but it's the whole package of who you are, right?
Yeah. The value is a moot point. That she knows who I am. That's what it is. That's what Mike is saying. I think that's what Mike is saying. I'm saying, my wife could easily say, right, sorry, darling, you're 1 year too old. I'm off. I'm going to find me a younger guy with more testosterone than you. She won't. I'm not going to do the same to her, right?
To Anthony's point.
Go on, Michael. A bit louder. I always need you louder.
To Anthony's point is that yes, each individual looks for value. Individual. I mean, the way Annie is describing his wife, I don't know if that's what his wife is like. I have no idea. All I know is that I have my own values and I look for, and whoever is my spouse, they have their own values that they look for. I cannot really identify or reflect those. I reflect those values in a way, and I have no idea. I had no idea that I'm actually doing it, but I actually do it. And that's why they're with me. it's something that I don't gauge. It is something that I do not necessarily strive to do all the time because, I understand that that's what they're looking for. No, I just live my life the way I live it. And because I live the way I live, there is something in it that they value. That's why they're there with me. So that's what Anthony is, I think, trying to get at, is that each and every individual has their own way of identifying value, and that's for them only. They're individuals. They are unique, and that's why they're unique. They have their own set of values. In this world, there's no other person just like them. And just like when they look at you, there's no other person just like you. But they value you for what you, for what they think you're valuable for. It's just like for me when I think about people, the way they go after gold. It's kind of like, what is the point of going after gold? What is that? I mean, what is its value? In reality, what does it do? What does it do for my life? Gold. It's heavy. It just, if I were to carry it, it's just going to burden me. If I hold it and possess it, other people are just going to be jealous of me and then come and try and take it away. Why would I want that thing in my life? It's got more negative things attached to it than positive things, if at all.
Yeah.
So that's people in this world, in this universe, value things a different way. We're all unique, very unique, and that's why I love this world in particular, because we look at things objectively, and we say to ourselves, do I value it or do I not value it? And this is what makes us like this person or not like that person, or like this other person. We each have our own lane. We each have our own values. We each have our likes and dislikes. And that's what makes us unique, and also allows us to be in company of people who it seems like as if we shouldn't be in company of, but we are, because there's something about them that is we value. And that's the way I see it.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna.
No, I agree, and I think to myself, however somebody values somebody else, there's always the option that you could provide more. Like if you better yourself, you can provide more of that or less of that. And at some point in time, if you provide too little of what it is they value, well, then it doesn't matter about you being you. They won't value you enough to take you seriously, to be, thought about to make a difference in your life or in other lives. With the scenario about your wife leaving you because you got hurt, that's a tragic scenario. But I can think of a scenario where what if I had kids, and I love my kids more than anything, and I recognize that if my wife is to take care of myself, the kids, and everything, that we're all going to be in. There's another scenario where if she was to leave me for someone else who could provide a better role model, could provide a better support, could help my children in a way that I couldn't. I don't know. I think that I would want her to recognize that, look, the kids matter more than all of us. And if it's just down to them, then yeah, your value has become less than what we could provide them. At some point in time, you have to find a balance, because then what do I provide them? I can still be there for social interactions, to say hi or whatever. I think that's something that females more typically do, because they're the selectors. They get approached by many men, and they have to look through the hundreds of men that ask them out and say, these are the traits I like. These are this is the patch of men that I would happily select any one of them, but I have to narrow it down to one. And so now there's a comparison that goes on, right? There has to be some sort of a comparison. This person's funnier. this person supports the lifestyle I want more. This person's going to be able to help my.
Anthony,
they're going to be better with my family.
Anthony, you break my heart. Anthony, you break my heart. You really do.
But for real, how do you think that works? Is there not?
People don't. I don't compare you and think I need a friend. So is Anthony better than Mike? That's just not how it works, man.
No.
That's just not how it works.
Definitely not.
Right. And so my wife's not thinking, I could have another man instead, because we made a pact with the devil. That's what we did. That's what we do, really, right? Now, call it what you like, whether we fall in love or we chose to be in a relationship, right? Mm-hmm. I'm saying, now Mike mentioned spirituality earlier. There is a missing alchemy bit in all of this that is within us and can't be described. And the reason why we choose someone, is who knows? Really, who knows? I wonder what Dr. Mariam's saying. Dr. Mariam's saying what I hear you discuss are different types of value: inherent, intrinsic value, versus beauty, truth, dignity, blah blah blah, right? Versus life, instrumental value. This is something so valuable as a means to an end. And I say not everyone thinks like the means to an end thing. And when other people think of the intrinsic value, that's what we are as human beings. Mm-hmm. No?
If there is a scarcity aspect
can
time,
you guys tell
right?
me whether we are practicing projection here? Does it sound as if
I don't think projection is everything we have to practice. I think that's just I think projecting is like is just natural state, and trying to project less is good. But an example, and you have one slot available. You can only interact with one person. You have 30 requests. Of those 30 requests, there are 10 of those requests that if you were to get just any one of them, you would select, this one person wants my time, I'll choose them. But now you have at least 10 people that want your time, and you would happily spend your time with any 10 of them. But you have to choose one.
Yes, I would choose one. We rearrange others along with a hat. No. It's what Dr. Mariam said. The interest in that, I probably choose my best customer, one that pays me the most, the one whose work is most urgent, for example. I might choose my best friend. Yeah. I might choose the person who's my next best customer because I can see that I need to meet with them to close the deal. I'm saying there's many different ways I would choose.
But ultimately, you're choosing, and when you're
choosing, I would choose. Yeah.
And by choosing based on whatever criteria you choose on, there may be those that have more or less value in that chosen criteria.
Yes,
and that becomes. Does that not become its own?
No, that's not a deal breaker. No, I'm doing it now. I'm in to meet someone on the hour. Now, 6 o'clock my time. We'll do have to go soon, right? I'm saying, so I'm saying to her, let's meet after my next event. That's human nature. We have the chance to make such decisions. It's not one or none. It's not do or die, is it? It never is, right? Now, maybe for a dog or a fish, maybe it's do or die. So for humans, we have choices. We can make choices, and we can adapt, flex, man or woman.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad we agree that.
Yeah.
I just want to kind of maybe round this off. Dr. Miriam really kind of hit the nail on what we've been talking about, all of these various attributes of value. But at some point in our in that selection / choice process, we have to do what we believe is the best choice at that time. But then we just don't, when we find out that maybe it wasn't a bad choice, we just throw her away and look for the next one. That's what you would do if this was just purely competition, in my mind.
I've never said it. Yeah, I've never wanted to make the idea that it's purely anything. Everything is like a balance of aspects, and I feel like we're forgetting one. When we try to take out one aspect of it, then I'm focusing on it. But not to say that it should just be the one dominant thing. It should be considered and balanced appropriately with whatever the alternative is. So even
and I also think, by the way, that I'm not going to say wait until you're 40, But I think when you're young, maybe you don't have enough of maturity to go through that list and make a good selection criteria. I think sometimes, like maybe looks is the highest on our list, or beauty, and I just think, I mean, that's great for, but that then to me that is kind of shallow. As
but that's too specific. I even used the example with any having time to spend, and that was an example where you have legitimate criteria that matters to any, maybe to other people, but at the end of the day, there are some people who are going to outcompete the others, right? Because there is a limited amount of time, and you have 10 people, you only have time for one. You can push them back, but you can push them back until when? You're going to die. And you are so important to the world, Annie, that everyone is going to want every second of your time right up until you die. Maybe even after that. They're going
Amen. And look, more to that, right? Especially if they're willing to pay me for what I do for them, right? No, but look, I think, the reason I'm speaking about this point now is simply to say, let's say I'm on a list of 10, like you say, right? And much like Mike is saying, wisdom tells me, Annie, if you don't take number one spot to the next in an hour's time, for example, it's nothing to do with me. It's not a reflection on me at all. It's not a reflection on even their love for me. It just means they made a choice, and whatever choice they've made is what it is. Now, let me give you an example. I spent my life learning to be a HR specialist. So you have to do recruitment and selection. And even when I started my company, I tried to apply some of the principles, right? So let me tell you, everyone I ever employed, I knew straight away I was going to fire them. Imagine that. So the winner was going to get fired anyway, because the process of selecting number one is flawed. You don't know someone until you know them, right? But so you have to make a choice and then turn the others away. And I always knew, as soon as I got a chance to meet with them, I knew instantly, damn, another mistake. So I'm saying it's the same in life. If someone chooses someone, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean it doesn't mean anything about you or me or anyone else. It just means that that's the choice they made, and more often than not, they'll be wrong, which is fine.
But they were competing for that spot, right? When you apply for a job,
they weren't competing. They were just on the list. It doesn't matter. There's competition doesn't work. Look, I think Dr. Miriam, I love you. I love your comment. Look, and if you have to read all the way down to what she's saying, and you find that there's so many different things, different ways that we can place value. That the moral value, for example, I'm saying that is something that's, that is unmeasurable. The relational value that she puts there as well. That's unmeasurable, right? But this is the things that
whether or not one has more to you rather than the other. You can say this person.
No, I'm saying to you, I would choose. I gave you my criteria earlier, and I found there's economic value. If you pay me, if you're my best customer, then obviously I'm going to attend to you because you're my best customer, right? And I want to keep you. If you're a prospect, then I probably want to talk to you because you're my next customer. You're going to add to my pot, right? And I wasn't everybody. If I love you and adore you, and you're my best friend. I can think of many people on LinkedIn who are my best friends. You see, Lisa is one of them. I mention her every time, right? I'd probably meet with her. Paulette, I'll drop everything to just meet with Paulette because she's Paulette.
She's awesome.
Right. I'm saying but I'll make a choice. But I'm not. It doesn't reflect on any of the others at all. Because a choice I must make because for my time is finance, like you say, Anthony. I get that. So in that case, with the Paulette and the Lisa, our relationship is more important than anything else. But if I chose them, not my best customer, does that say anything really about my values? I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I feel like we're trying to apply too much of if you say that there is a comparison or that there's competition, then it speaks badly to those who don't win, which I don't think that's the case. I think it just speaks very highly of the person who did win. It's about building up the purple. This person went out of their way and they did something that made them get selected, right? And that I think it's good to to look at somebody and say, look, that person, they tried really hard. They were already good, but they got better. They wouldn't stop. They didn't give up. And look at them now. They are so goddamn good that we have them on poster somewhere because we just want to show you what you can do if you never stop trying.
The Olympics are a zero-sum game, Anthony. We would like to believe, and probably way, way back in the day, they weren't. But if you become an Olympic champion, then you can get, endorsements and make a lot of money. So it's, I agree with you in that maybe, and I hate to shoot on anybody, but that's maybe the way it should be. But I don't, in today's world, at least for those that we seem to pile accolades on, that's not necessarily the case.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Annie, I need your help, man. I don't know how to wrap things up or how to keep things on a schedule. I think we were all aiming for about an hour here. I love to talk, but I'm gonna have to hand it off to you.
So we're nearly 3 hours in, 2.5 hours. We've been talking. There's a simple thing, and the same way you started. There'll be a button in your top right somewhere that says "end." Do you have music?
No music, but okay. I guess we'll just say, have a good day, everybody, and thank you for all the time you guys have spent here. That makes I feel valuable because I know how valuable you guys' time is and how highly I value it, and I just really appreciate you guys' time because I feel like I grew a lot, learned a lot, and I enjoyed it. So thank you.
No, it's a fascinating conversation for sure, right? I think so of course I think we've all learned something today as well. So we thank you, my friend. I say, what is your plan going forward? Are you going to do more of these rooms?
Yeah, I plan on doing more rooms. Topics won't always be this divisive, but some might be. It's something. See how they come.
This was not divisive. This was unifying, Anthony.
Yeah.
I feel like some people hear the topic
as well. I've enjoyed doing it. It's a different kind of rooms. So some rooms, my rooms tend to be state your view. Let others state their view. So the audience would take away what they want. But civil debate is perfectly fine, right? It's fine. I like your style. And it's cool.
Adversarial conversations, Anthony, actually can be some of the most, and this is what I'm seeking, is generative discussions where we can sharpen each other's viewpoints and maybe even clarify through the sharpening. And I always come away, Anthony, even if I don't agree with you, typically you have nudged my point of view like 2 degrees. And so I'm going to go pick at that thread and say, okay, he wasn't 100% wrong. So what do I need to look at? What do I need to pull that thread? And I'm sorry. I actually found this conversation very stimulating and interesting because it would be boring if we all just agreed with everything. And so I really enjoyed it, and I thank you for doing it.
I agree with you, Mike. Look, I will thank the audience as well, Anthony. I think the audience has spent the time with us. Anthony Mountain Joy, for example. I always choose the short blonde, Anthony, and I always do. That's what I like, right? Call me sick or call me crazy. Say worse. That's. But thank you for spending your time with us, Anthony. Everyone who spent the time with us, we appreciate your time. We really do. So tentatively, I'll say, look out for our next event. I'm sure Anthony's going to do another one of these. There's a list of topics that we do want to discuss. So I've got a show next at an hour and a half. So we're talking miscarriage and baby loss with Christiana. She's talking about triggers. What triggers people who have experienced loss? What do we do that compounds their pain, in other words, the trauma? If that interests you at all, then connect with me, send me a DM. I'll send you an invite. So that's better I can offer. Mike, you're always a gent, my friend. You're always a genius gent at that. So I appreciate you for joining us. You made it a lot more fun.
It was my pleasure and a blessing to be here.
Awesome, my friend. Anthony, all you can do, my friend, now is say, have your last word and then press the end, and then we'll go from there, right?
Simply put, I love you guys. This was exciting. I like the conversation, and I'm looking forward to doing more. You guys enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you hopefully at that next talk. Annie.
Take care, everyone. Take care, everyone. Take care. So you press end, right?
It's ended.